All right, what's up, folks? Antonio Fletcher back with you once again. This is going to be another edition of The Lifeline. This is episode number 8, and today we're going to be debunking Mr. Matt Dillahunty. We're going to be looking at some pro-choice arguments he was in a debate with another pro-lifer, an atheist pro-lifer at that. And you see, it's awesome to see that the pro-life position is such a great defensible position that it doesn't even need to be defended on faith-based religious grounds. Even if you're a secular atheist, you can be a pro-lifer and still defend the pro-life position without fail. So I'm going to be looking at this little clip of Matt Dillahunty's giving some pro-choice arguments of his, and we're going to be analyzing them and debunking them because they're not that strong. A lot of people think Matt Dillahunty is this very strong arguer in a number of different subjects. I don't think Matt Dillahunty is that strong of a arguer for almost anything he says, whether it's atheism or abortion. So we're going to be looking at this video. I'm going to screen share it for you. And as it's going on, I'm going to be critiquing some of the things he says and showing why his arguments are just abysmal. So just give me just a sec to set up the screen share and we'll get into this. Okay, here's Matt Dillahunty here. And this was the outline presentation that he gave. I believe it was the opening segment of his argument, or maybe it was a different segment. I don't remember what part of the argument it was, but anyway, he gives us outline and basis for his position here. So let's get into it, and we'll start now.
The right to bodily autonomy is one of the most foundational principles that has guided this process. When a proposed restriction would violate this right, there's a very heavy burden to overcome before that violation can be justified. We tend to limit rights at the boundary of the individual. One person's right to swing their fist at some point ends at some point prior to contacting somebody else's nose. And I'd argue that even if we were to go so far as to declare the fetus a person, a huge irrational mistake in my opinion, that fetus's right to swing its umbilical cord ends somewhere prior to the wall of the uterus.
Okay, this is just bad for God knows how many reasons, but the most pertinent reason, in my view, the reason why that comparison is so bad is because it's not like the unborn fetus hijacked some woman's womb. That is not what happened. You're talking about a biological process of life as opposed to an assailant. That's not even remotely a good comparison. That's just weak. Come on, Matt, you're smarter than that, man. That is just one of the most ridiculous comparisons I've ever heard. You probably have a more sufficient basis if the unborn fetus just literally hijacked the woman's womb, but that's not what happened. So you cannot make that argument. Let's continue on.
When it comes to pregnancy, there are a lot of potential rights to be considered, and it may be the case that there's no compromise that will be satisfactory to all parties.
Well, there's not going to be a compromise because one position is right and one position is wrong. That's just the bottom line. somebody's right, somebody's wrong. And this debate is going to continue because the other side thinks they're right and the other side thinks they're wrong. That's why there's not going to be a compromise. You cannot if something is truly right or wrong, there can be no compromise. Like rape, for example. Either rape should be permissible or shouldn't be. You can't have it both ways. Somebody's right and somebody's wrong. That's just the bottom line. You're not going to be able to compromise on something like that. And abortion is the same way. There is not going to be a compromise, man. So, I mean, that's just nonsense. I get tired of these people talking about, well, let's try to look for a compromise. Or no, how about you just base your position or give a good basis for your position and argue it? I ain't got to compromise with you. You ain't got to compromise with me. Argue your position, point blank. Let's continue.
The nature of the situation may be such that there are always going to be irreconcilable conflicts. How is it that one ignores the rights, desires, freedoms, health, and humanity of a living, breathing, thinking, feeling person in favor of another person, let alone in favor of a handful of cells or developing fetus that is neither viable or conscious? It's likely that you'll hear appeals to the value of life, things like it's human, it's alive, it's equal. But is it really? When we talk about the value of life, we're not talking about the value of a heartbeat. We're talking about the value of experiencing life, living life, awareness. Terry Schiavo was dead long before anybody pulled the plug, and a fetus, while it is as alive as a mass of cancer cells, under one definition, is not alive in the sense that it is not reasonably equivalent.
What does he mean by experiencing life? That's just nonsense. There's a reason why, in many cases, late-term abortion is illegal. Has it experienced life? His arguments are extremely vague at best. I mean, does he mean the entity has to be born to experience life that way? What does he mean? You see, when pro-abortionists like Matt Dillahunty argue their position, they have these question-begging, just vague positions that make absolutely no sense, and it's just something that they literally pulled out the air. Let's continue on.
Consider teratomas, which include organs, unique organs. How do you make that distinction? The biological complexities of this situation are staggering. Abortion is the termination of a pregnancy. It is something that I think could arguably be considered self-defense in many cases.
All right, self-defense. Like, okay, I've heard this argument so many times that abortion is self-defense. Okay, when you're dealing with a self-defense situation, that's not particularly something you can plan. Like, for example, if you are defending yourself from an assailant, you don't plan to defend yourself from an assailant. It's just something that just happens naturally. It's not something you can just turn on and off. What I mean by that is sometimes you have cases to where pregnancies are planned, but maybe certain things don't go the way they want to. Like the fetus has a deformity of some sort that's detectable in the womb, and then they say, well, this fetus, when born, is going to have lifelong health problems, and we don't want to deal with that, so let's get an abortion. You can't call something like that self-defense. You can't just say that, okay, in one moment you think it's something that you readily accept to happen to you, and then turn it off, and then say it's self-defense all of a sudden. You can't do that because it's not fitting for you. You can't plan to have a child and then all of a sudden, when you're not ready to have that kid, just say it's infringing on my body because now I don't want to hear. Now I'm in a position of defense. That's not how it works. Now you may say, well, what about women who don't plan their pregnancies and they just get pregnant when they don't want to? Well, then I would go to the other part of this argument to where it's about the fact that they know about how sex works. And it's not like the majority of the time we're dealing with cases of rape, for example, to where a woman is literally forced beyond her will to get pregnant. We're dealing with a situation to where a woman knows that the risk of sex can lead to pregnancy. So it's not like she was surprised about getting pregnant. She knew that beforehand. It's not anything that's really arguable, to be quite honest. So when he says it could be argued as self-defense, I think it literally only stops at that point. Maybe it's some crazy unknown universe it could be, but in reality, no. There is no chance abortion can be argued as self-defense. If somebody is hitting you in the face, like an assailant is hitting you in the face, you let them hit you in the face, and then you say all of a sudden you want to defend yourself mid getting hit in the face. And then you all of a sudden say, you know what, I don't want to defend myself mid attack. And then you stop defending yourself, and then you let them hit you some more. And then you turn on defense mid attack. No, that's not how self-defense works. Real self-defense is something that you do not initiate. It's something that you can't turn on and off. That's not how abortion works. Let's continue.
Not just when your life is necessarily in danger, you have the right to defend yourself in all sorts of situations. But the bodily rights argument specifically addresses this issue of personhood, whether or not there's an individual. So my argument isn't sound depending on whether or not it's a human. It completely, I could acknowledge, I could grant, as a matter of course, yes, the fetus is a person, and let's give it every right a person has. I won't do that because I think that's stupid. But I could do that.
Stupid in your personal opinion. Let's continue. This is wow. Wow, man. There was the condescension in this guy. It's just off the charts.
And it still wouldn't change the facts that this is now we are in a situation where there are two persons whose rights are in conflict. And we must.
In conflict. Okay. I've addressed this so many times in past years to where pro-abortionists say, well, you're dealing with the case to where there's two rights in conflict. Well, I don't think so. Because, like, for example, if a parent is raising a child, right, it's not the same state of affairs. And what I mean by that is a child is in a position to where the child is obligated to someone to raise them. The child is not on the same level as the adult, and as far as they can depend on themselves and do things for themselves and raise themselves. You're not dealing with the same state of affairs. So the fact that you have a parent or guardian raising a child, they can't all of a sudden be like, well, I want to raise this. Well, I guess they could, but they would still have to give up their obligation to someone else. They couldn't just be like, you know what, I'm not ready to raise this child. Or not ready. I don't want to keep raising this child, I should say. They can't just be like, well, I don't want to keep raising this child because now that I'm in a position to where I no longer want to raise this child is in conflict with my rights. No. You're not dealing with the same state of affairs. It's not like you got an an 18-year-old person, a grown adult, fully able-bodied, who can take care of themselves and who no longer requires your care. It's not like that. So there is no conflict of rights just because you don't want to take care of a child. If the child was in the same state of affairs as you, who was able-bodied and can do things on their own, then yeah, I'll grant that argument at that point. But the unborn is in a position to where the unborn requires the care of someone else. You can't call that a conflict at that point. A child's obligation to someone else is not a conflict of rights because you're not dealing with the same state of affairs. If you were dealing with the same state of affairs, maybe you can make a case of conflict, like two adults. But that's not how it works for a child. Let's continue.
Come to some reconciliation is that denying women this basic human right makes them slaves to their biology.
Slaves to this is, oh my goodness, slaves to biology. See, this is the problem. The mindset today has basically turned motherhood from the most joyful thing, the most amazing thing possibly any person on this planet can do, to something that's interfering with a woman's liberation. Talk about a slave to her biology. It's just ridiculous. No woman today is a slave to her biology, especially to where there's options for her to prevent that with 10 trillion different types of birth control, as well as stuff like sterilization and stuff like getting a full hysterectomy. There is no argument to be made that a woman is being a slave to her biology. That's just dumb. And even if not a single bit of contraception like that was available, you can't say she's being a slave to her biology, because even then, she don't have to have sex at a time to where she's not ready for a child to be conceived. Point blank. You can't just sit up here and be like, oh, I'm not ready to be pregnant right now. Oh, I'm a slave. If you saying I can't get this abortion, or were you can't just, it's not like, how can I put this? It is basically like someone admitting to, or someone wanting to adopt a child, and the child, they're no longer ready to raise that kid, and then they say, oh, I'm a slave. I'm a slave to my parental rights. Like, no, you're not a slave to anything. You knew what the consequences and the criteria was and the conditions were to raise that kid. You're not a slave to anything. A woman, you can't say a woman is a slave to her biology. She knows how her body works. She knows that sex can lead to the possibility of pregnancy. It's not like she's not in control of getting pregnant, because she is. So this slave to biology argument, this is just garbage. Oh my goodness, who even honestly thinks this dude's remotely intellectual when it comes to stuff like abortion? This is just garbage.
Attempts to justify this thinly veiled naturalistic fallacy basically amount to, yes, you're pregnant and you don't want to be. That must be terrible for you. I'm sorry that nature has screwed you over, but that's the way it has to stay. Unless we find that your life is at risk, I'm assuming you do make an exception in the case of the mother's life.
If there is no other, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I shouldn't have asked a question. Sorry, cheating. But unless there is some exception, and then we'll set aside nature and all of our principles and all the arguments that we made before about how it's a human and you can't kill it, and we'll go ahead and do that because now maybe we realize that there's some self-defense going on. I've got, what, 2 minutes? Hey, Grant?
No, the fact that a woman's life can be in danger in pregnancy has nothing to do with a self-defense. That's not a self-defense situation. Just because, like someone's drowning, the lifeguard goes into the water and gets that person out and tries to resuscitate this person, that's not a self-defense situation. That's just the lifeguard doing whatever they can to save this person's life. You can't call that self-defense. In the same way, when somebody is trying to save a woman's life, you can't call that self-defense. That's saving someone's life is not their life being defended, it's their life being saved. Self-defense has to do with attacks from an assailant. Saving someone's life ain't the same thing as self-defense. This is the problem with pro-abort logic. They constantly take other areas and conflate them with things that have nothing to do with what they're saying. They take one area and then take another area and then conflate it as the same thing. It's not the same thing.
That she showed, beginning with a fertilized embryo and ending with a 20-year-old, and the argument of saying that there are similar differences between a 20-year-old and a newborn as there are between a newborn and a newly fertilized egg is nifty. But there's more than just size, level of dependence. And I didn't raise the question of value. My issue of value is that we must value an individual's rights to sovereignty and bodily autonomy. We don't have the right to force you to donate a kidney or an arm. We don't have the right to force you to be pregnant. There are a number of complicated and difficult questions that we have to ask, and some of them I hope actually we get the chance to ask and discuss tonight.
Okay, this issue about we don't force people to donate kidneys or arms or anything like that, you can't compare that to abortion because, look, if someone is in need of your organ, for example, let's say, I don't know, let's look at you as person A, and then look at the person who needs your organ as person B. Person B needs your kidney to live, and you're person A. Person B requests your kidney, and you tell person B, no, I don't want to give my kidney up to you. You may have to find somebody else, but I'm not obligated to give my kidney to you. Even if person B was not able to find a kidney, and after a while they passively die on their own because they didn't get the kidney they needed to live, that's the fact that they passively died. Now, some people be like, well, how can that be any different than an abortion? Here's how it's different. Now, person B passively dies because you didn't give your kidney to them. But before that person passively died away, could you take a .38 caliber gun and then shoot them to death while they're still alive, passing away? Before they completely passed away, could you take a .38 caliber gun and shoot them to death? No. So there's a clear difference between active killing and the passive dying of someone because you rejected your body or an organ from your body to the person who needed it. So when you're dealing with abortion, you're not just dealing with this issue of passive death. You're dealing with the active, literal killing of the unborn. You can look at a number of different abortion procedures and find out that these methods are specifically designed to kill, actively kill. This is what these methods do. You can't sit up here and put the passive dying of a human being as the same as active killing. And that is the number one main reason why the organ donation fallacy just doesn't work in comparison to what abortion is.
At the end of the day, I didn't call this a potential human. I'm happy for the sake of arguments and some limited arguments to call it, I guess, a potential person, because there's some debate about whether or not we're going to give it the rights of a person. But even if we do, that doesn't in any way change the nature of the discussion. I can have a kid, and I do not have any obligation to donate blood, kidneys, or make use, or allow them to make use of my body.
Again, the difference being between the fact that you are not obligated to give your organs to them, but you are obligated to not actively take their lives. That's the point. You are obligated to honor their right not to be killed. You have no right to intentionally take their lives just because they are in need of your dependence. That's the distinction, Matt. You need to learn what that means.
So I'm glad that my argument is sound, if that's not a human being.
No, it's not sound. Even conceding the criteria of you accepted for the sake of argument that there's a human being, a person with rights and all that other jazz, no, your argument's not sound. It's terrible. It's, in fact, there is no strong abortion argument to me, not a single one. It's bad. But this is pretty much the end of this video. But this is just laughable that anybody remotely takes this guy seriously. But let's see. Let me read. I got a few comments here in the chat here. Haley, what's up? Good to see you. And one says, is life and a soul created upon fertilization? Well, I'll say that, scientifically speaking, it's true to say that life begins at conception. Like when the sperm gamete fertilizes the egg gamete at the fertilization conception point, life begins. Now, as far as a soul or a spirit or what have you, I'm not sure when that happens. I don't, as a believing Christian, I don't really know when God would put a soul into the unborn. I don't know when that happens. But that is totally irrelevant to this whole argument because, again, the person that Matt Dillahunty was debating was an atheist. She wasn't a Christian, yet she is vehemently pro-life from conception. So that's really a non-issue. And Haley says life does biologically begin at conception, which is correct. And here's another one. Why did God set up this world so that 30% of pregnancies would end up in a natural abortion where the mother didn't even know she was pregnant? Well, you could also ask the same question. Why did God set up this? Well, here's the thing. I wouldn't necessarily say, if you're going to move this to a theological position, because here's the problem. When you're talking to a lot of pro-aborts, they like to constantly look to see if the person who's the pro-lifer is a Christian or who's a believer. And he says, please don't say fallen world. Well, that's what I'm going to say. What else do you expect me to say as a Christian? I mean, it doesn't matter whether you want me to say it or not. Can you actually refute the point? As a Christian, I do believe in a fallen world, and that the perfection that God had when he first created the world resulted in things like most of the pregnancies being lost and things like natural disasters and all that other stuff. So it's not a matter of you, me saying fallen world, you got to actually refute the argument. Not liking it is not an argument. But that's the thing. You can't just constantly just move the issue to the theological side, because you don't have to be religious or a faith-based believer to be pro-life. But that's just one of pro-abort's favorite angles. They love to try to attack people on theological grounds. But even if you successfully defeat every argument on theological grounds, that doesn't mean you've defeated the pro-life position. It's not the same thing. So if you want to constantly attack what the non-relevant issue is, you can do that, but you'd be essentially attacking a red herring. You just shifting the subject to where not the relevant issue is. It doesn't argue against the pro-life position. The pro-life position itself is not a religious, faith-based position. It is a position on humanity. It's the position that once you have a human being, the end all and be all is just that, a human being. You don't make any excuses to intentionally take the life of a human being just because you want to. Just because it's inconvenient for you. Now, I don't know if maybe you want to join for a little bit, Haley. Maybe, I don't know if you be able to talk for a little bit, but if you want to, I'd love to have a chat with you on air if you can join. But anyway, the theological position of a Christian, we can talk about that, and I have no problem like on another sort of setting or another forum, but ultimately that has nothing to do with well, I'm not going to say it has nothing to do with my position, but for those who aren't believers, it has nothing to do with their position. Ultimately, my position as a Christian is because Jesus Christ values his children. Jesus said, be better for those who harm a hair on the head of these little ones. It'd be better for those to have a millstone around their neck and be dragged to the bottom of the sea than to face him on Judgment Day. So my ultimate basis is I'm a believer. I believe in the life of the unborn because that's where the heart of Jesus is. And wherever the heart of Jesus is where I want to be. And she says, can I schedule a chat for tomorrow afternoon? Yeah, that's perfect for me. We'll talk about the details, Haley, but yeah, that sounds good. I can't wait. But as for a secular position, the secular position is that humanity is the basis for life. And you don't draw the line beyond humanity. Because the central question that informed pro-lifers like to present is, what is it? What is the unborn? If the unborn is not a human, then any position, any argument can be justifiable. Go ahead and get the abortion. Do what you want to do. All things are justifiable if the unborn is not a human. But if the unborn is a human, then no argument is adequate. Sometimes you have those like Matt Dillahunty says, yes, that's fine, Haley. That's cool. We can do that. 1:30 sounds good. But as I was saying, sometimes you'll have pro-choicers like Matt Dillahunty say, well, even if I do agree the unborn is a human or a person, for the sake of argument, the abortion argument still works. And I'll just go to say this: if you're gonna um, go beyond the scope of adhering to humanity and personhood, if you're gonna go beyond the scope of that, then where do you draw the line? If you're gonna go beyond the mere fact of being a human and a person, if you still think abortion is justifiable at that point, then where do you really draw the line? Who's to say that a different standard can't be okay? Like, for example, they say even if I admit the unborn is a human being, a person, I can still kill this person. Well, who's to say that you cannot make that same sort of argument once this human is born, that you can't kill this person? And then the arguments come up, well, this person, human being, is outside the womb now, so the whole thing changes. Well, I say, who says the whole thing changes? Who says? I mean, honestly, the only reason why we take care of born children is because we're not a sick society who thinks that newborn babies deserve to be just left to die. We only do that because we are a merciful society, at least in that aspect. In other aspects, we're not such a merciful society because we allow abortion to begin with, but at least we got enough sense to say that once a baby's born, that we don't just think that it should be okay for someone just to leave the baby out in the middle of nowhere. So us as a society, we assume the obligation of this baby if, let's say, the mother can't take care of it, or she takes the baby to a safe haven location and that's a wrap for her. She releases her obligation to someone else, and that whoever that person goes from there takes care of the child. And then the child just goes through the motions through life, maybe through foster parents, or maybe at some point the child ends up with loving parents and gets raised by them. But any number of things can happen with a child that's left at a safe haven location. But the point is that society being merciful enough to even allow things like a safe haven location, at least our westernized society here in the United States, anyway. I don't really know how it works in other westernized countries, like, let's say, Australia, the UK and whatnot, but here in the United States, and I believe all 50 states, we do have safe haven laws to where the mother can just leave the newborn child at any location. But we only do that because we are a merciful society that allows that to happen. We did not even have to allow that. We could be like, you know what? There's nobody who should be obligated to a newborn, not even the parent, not even the mother or the father. So when you argue that, even assuming for the sake of argument, it's okay to kill the human being, the person, where do you really draw the line? If you go beyond human being, I argue that you can't draw any line without being just totally arbitrary, without just pulling the line out the sky. There is no such line that can be drawn at any point without pulling it out the sky. We don't want to see newborn babies just left in the middle of the desert. So we allow people in society other than the biological parent or parents to take care of that child. But then that's just the newborn babies at literally at the mercy of whatever society deems. If hypothetically speaking, society wanted to change their mind and said, look, nobody should be obligated to taking care of a newborn baby, then it would not matter about that baby being a human being or a person. It would not matter whether the woman got an abortion in the womb or whether she didn't get an abortion and she still didn't want to raise the kid and the kid was just killed or left to die somewhere when born. I submit to you that if you're going to take the issue beyond a person, beyond a human, then I don't see any line you can draw to where you can stop. I really don't. I think the best line you can draw, and the only line that should be drawn, is the humanity of the unborn. You can argue personhood all day, you can do whatever you want. But at the end of the day, it is scientifically irrefutable that you're dealing with a human being in the womb. And if you want to draw beyond that line, then if you want to violate that standard, then I say that there's no standard that you can draw without being arbitrary. But that's my little response to Matt Dillahunty's video and my analysis here. So hopefully soon, as this channel grows and as more people watch, we'll start to get into more deep discussions and I'll start talking to more people. But since at the current time my channel is relatively small and I don't have a whole lot of subscribers, I'm not going to get as many people watching now, but I intend to keep doing these shows and I intend to grow this channel to inspire more discussion and more debate. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and end this hangout. And I'll see you all next time. God bless and peace.